So thank you very much for inviting me. I think this debate will be about ecology and about resources. And I think it's the group of people that are with us today are really interesting. So just to introduce Clare Twomey, that she's an artist from England. So she will present her work. Alison Tickell, she's the founder of Jolie Bicycles. So this is a non-profit company that helping the music industry to reduce the environmental impact. And then we have Timothy LeCain, that is professor, is an historian and is professor at the Montana State University. And the idea of this discussion is to talk about ecology and maybe the relation between human and non-human. And I think what is really interesting today is that, you know, we, because of the climate change that is in a certain way transforming our condition of living as human, and also the virus that is also a new actor inside the field of the world. So we are no more, you know, like the 70 last year, where we were like the king of the world. You know, the human was like dominating the world. And so I think today, because of the climate change, because of the virus, we understand that the non-human are also there. And I think what is interesting in our debate is to understand that maybe the relation is not only from human to non-human. You know, this is something that is really common today in the French philosophy. For example, everybody are talking about, okay, to things like a tree, to things like ice, to things like an animal, but nobody is talking about, and the animal is thinking about the human. And I think this discussion is really interesting in this relationship between human and non-human. And this is a little what I would like to hear today. I will just present myself really briefly. I am an architect from Paris. I'm currently in Rome. Okay, so just to say, you know, what I'm doing in my work as an architect. I say that as an architect, you are designing things, but in reality, the material is also designing things. So it means if you are doing a wall, like a vertical wall, it's not because as a human you decide, okay, I do a vertical wall. It's because if you are doing a wall like that, you know, it will fall down. So it means that the verticality of the wall is made by the gravity and is also made by the human. But the gravity is also the designer of the architecture. And today, the climate is also the designer of the architecture. It means that we are not, you know, like a genius designer, genius artist, you know, doing things alone. But we are, in reality, we are also made by, you know, by the virus. We are made by the natural condition. So just to explain that, I will show just two projects, you know, that are very simple about the condition. The first one is about architecture. So it's to say, okay, as an architect, you are designing before, maybe during the postmodern period, we were designing with geometrical tools or with narrative tools or with analogical tools. Or, I mean, with like narrative tools. But today, maybe we can also design with convection, conduction, with natural phenomena. And to explain that, I just want to show a small project made on convection. So this is an apartment, and it's based on the idea how to reduce the consumption of energy linked to the physics of the air. You know, this is the Archimedes law. The warm air go up and the cold air go down. So it means that, you know, depending of our action, if you are naked or if you have some clothes, or if you have moving a lot, or if you have not moving, you can find a good location in the layers of the air, in the verticality of the air. So it means the bathroom will be where it's very hot because you are naked and full of water, so you need more heat on your skin. And in the bedroom, you can be under the inside your bed, so you can so we can use the Archimede, the convective stratification of the air, to design the space like that. So this is a project we made. We made a lot of projects based on that. So here we can see that the bathroom is on the top of just under the floor, and the kitchen is lower. So this is more the climatic conditions that are creating the design of the project. And as designer, we are working with convection, with its meteorological, climatic, real parameter. Another project we made on convection was also based on that. So this is just some image of this. It was in the same idea. It was a building for apartment, and here you can see this is a section, but I will show directly some image. The slab are changing of height. More you go up, more it's becoming warm, and more you go down, more it's cool. So we can see this apartment. You can have some migration inside the different temperature of the air by moving up. You go in the more warm area, and you go down in a more cold area. And then at the urban scale, this is the condition of today. Linked to there is more heat waves. There is more. This is the urban heat island problem. There is more flood. There is more PM2.5 particle pollution. And all these things are becoming, what we are doing as a urban designer. Maybe before we were talking about, okay, we will do a nice visual axe on the statue of the king, or say organization like more prestige or some human organization. But today we have to talk about water management, rain management, soil pollution management, and things like that. And just to finish with that, this is a competition we have won with OMA, with Remcolas from Netherlands, from Italy, in Milan, where we are basing the new development of the urban, some new district of Milan on all the abandoned space, and we are creating some environmental machine, or like the public space is becoming a new type of environmental machine to clean the air, to cool the air, by using different type of physical property, like the albedo, like the convection, like different type of trees that can catch the PM2.5 pollution. So how to cool the city by working with the physics and with climatic issues. So what I'm now finishing with that, to say, okay, today as designer, we have to work, with the element, with the natural element, and we have to say, okay, I'm not the only designer. The wind is also the designer. The heat is also the designer. And so, we have forget that during the 70 last years, because we were using so much fossil energy, we were using so much antibiotic too. We have completely lost this presence of the reality, of the physics, of the virus, and this is what's happened today. So, so thank you. And now I think, I will maybe have a small discussion of 5 minutes with Tim LeCain. He's professor at Montana University. He's the author of The Matter of History. This is, I think, a very interesting book, and maybe I think this book can be very interesting in Europe and in France too, because we have a lot of, as I say, we have a lot of books that are talking from a human point of view to the non-human, but we are not really talking from the non-human to the human. And I think, for example, Tim say that 80% of the cells that are composing the human body are non-human in reality. We are so it's and we know that some also some sentimental things are also involving some non-human cell. So maybe this is I think this is the question I want to ask you, Tim. Maybe this is how you can, or in the history, you can reintroduce this presence of the non-human, as designer, as author, in the reality of today.
Right. Well, thank you for that great presentation too, Philippe. That was fascinating. And it does tie in nicely with the kind of material turn here and the neo-materialism that I write about. But yeah, I guess what sort of I'm very intrigued by what you're doing and what the other panelists I think are going to be talking about as well. And that is this sort of possibility that the world around us can be a creative force. It can be a dynamic force and more of a co-creator with humans versus the old sort of idea, even the Enlightenment idea that, well, humans control the environment. They make things. They're the ones who are so creative and brilliant and special. And I think what's fascinating about where we are right now is this realization of our embeddedness in the world around us, right? That initially, I think, was sparked primarily by the realization of global warming, the idea that humans' activity, unbeknownst to them, by and large, would somehow have these huge effects on the environment, but then the environment is also affecting us. It's changing who we are and the way that we live and the way that we think. And once you sort of got to that level, it was more than just a backlash, wasn't it? It was more than just the earlier environmental realization that things we did were causing damage to our environment that we needed, but really that we're really embedded in that. And there's no escape from it, is there? There's no way to get out of global warming other than moving to Mars or something, right? Very impractical. It is who we are. And so I think that was kind of the key breakthrough, wasn't it? Then we started to realize this world is making us as much as we're making it. And what I find really exciting about what you were talking about, Philippe, is that you're trying to work with that creative environment. You're trying to channel it or to coax it or sort of nurture it. I think that more is nurturing than controlling. We grasp the possibilities and then they take us in unexpected directions. It has this kind of creativity, as I said, this sort of dynamism that changes who we are. So when I look at your apartment, and I love that idea of the different sort of convection levels, I would also, and you've probably thought of this, but I'd go a step farther and say, how will that change the people who use that space? How will they think differently? How will they become different human beings? And that's, I think, the really hopeful moment that we're in right now is we're moving from the older belief that the way to change people's minds is to talk to them, is to convince them to think differently. I think the events last week here in the United States have to really make us question these old ideas that, people are primarily rational humans who make decisions for logical reasons. I'm not sure that's necessarily the whole truth, but rather that they're being shaped by the environment. And that can be negative. It can be very bad, as we saw on January 6th, or it can be very good if we design the right kind of places, if we have the right kind of architecture and the right kind of art. And that's, I think, where you're going, right? These can be transformative. They can make us into better people, into better human beings who understand the world we live in. And so I'm really excited that you're doing this, and that all the other folks at this forum are doing this as well.
Tim, I have a last question for you. It's quite interesting. If you look to the 19th century with Karl Marx, the materiality was really there, to explain all the thinking, all as we think about the world, the human way of thinking about things were determined by the materiality. It's the main idea of Karl Marx. But this disappeared. In 1950, we can see the first change with Jean-Paul Sartre, with the existentialism, that is creating a kind of spiritualizing, moving from, okay, this is no more the materiality that is changing things, but this is more the spirit, and this is coming from Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre. And then it's continued very strongly with Adorno, Oppenheimer, and with Michel Foucault, and and then today, when we are talking about materiality, the strongness of the materiality, it's a really change from the postmodern period. So, this is, what do you think about this change? Because it's, the academy and the postmodern academy was so much based on spiritualism, without materiality, like a very strange moment. So, how you see this change? Because it's not so easy from an academic point of view.
Yeah, that's a good way to lay it out. Yeah, that sort of historical trajectory from Marx to Foucault is really kind of fascinating. And I think my short answer to that, Philippe, is I do think you used the phrase, it was maybe that wasn't exactly your words, but a strange period, the sort of postmodern period, when this emphasis on ideas and discourse, and as you said, sort of a spiritual idea of who we are as creatures came to the fore. And I think as a historian, I ask, well, why did that happen at that particular period? And I think it was because of the unusual circumstance of the post-war period, where there was sort of illusion that technology was going to take over everything, that humans really could control the world and control themselves, right? That they could re-engineer themselves and re-engineer the environment pretty much with impunity and successfully. And that overweening sort of Promethean arrogance, I think, became the dominant idea and sort of filtered into the humanities as well. And people thought, well, it's what we think, it's what we can be whoever we want to be. And then the environment sort of reasserted itself, right? Materiality pushed back, and we realized, one, that it's a powerful world out there. We can't necessarily control it. But two, and I think that's the more profound insight, is to go back to Marx and realize that we are our environments, that we do emerge from the world that we interact with. I think he was right on about that, Marx and Engels, that what you do and the things you interact with is who you become at a fundamental level. And now we have all this sort of science that confirms that, right? That shows us this really is true. As you say, the 2 or 3 kilograms of bacteria in my stomach have a big influence on who I am. And they're not me, right? It's not even my DNA. So to me, that's a really profound insight.
So thank you, Tim. So Clare, maybe you can introduce what you are doing. You are using clay, and maybe as an artist, maybe you can introduce what you are doing and how what is your position linked to the ecology, maybe to the materiality, and so maybe you can talk a little about you.
Hi, Philip. It's Claire from London, and I think that to respond to your question around my practice, I think that if I read my statement, then it might help to say a little about my position as well as the chosen use of my materials, I think, and the work that I've undertaken that deals with materiality and the sense of being human within materials, and also the fragility of a lot of those conditions. But I think one of the largest issues that is daunting me as an artist is scale. And so the statement that I have is around scale being a massive issue with our understanding of the urgencies of the ecological crisis. And I think there is a numbness surrounding our personal ability to grasp and enact a response. And I think I feel that as an artist. It is vital that for our ambitions for art to be a voice and an amplifier of action and change, that we address the numbness and the distance between the individual and the scale of the issues. I do think art can do this. I think it can pierce the film of resistance, not only that hinders, but that also protects us from the realities of our personal journeys that we will all have with our ecological crisis. And when I say R, this is kind of central to a lot of the work that I've undertaken. It's because I think the R is now because it's urgent that through our individuals can access a space of contemplation or realization of our futures. That is the future with action and a future without action. Art reaches deep into our personal spaces of self and the constructs we have set up to define ourselves. The connections art makes and touches in parts of our individual stories, and they can't be accessed in many other ways. In my work as an artist, I strive to create this moment for the public of the dawning of a story with personal impact that slowly becomes a story retold by them in their voice. As an artist, I have proposed and drawn personal commitment of many audiences to places of challenge, and now this must address our ecological crisis. It's time to reset. It is time to help others reset. So, Philip, in answering your question of my practice, I think that I feel this challenge as an artist, but I think that the works that I've undertaken and the unstable environments that I've created with clay and other materials to address the destabilization and a commitment to either to hold, to care, to be a witness to that destabilization is really important. When you're stood in front of a pile of 10 meters high of broken china, there are questions to be asked of yourself, of the fairy tale of its arrival, and to the reality of it. As an artist, I feel very much that I'm not on these journeys by myself. I feel that the institutes I work with, you know, these artworks they're hard to build, they're difficult because they involve a lot of changeable factors on an hourly basis. So I kind of feel that I'm not alone, but I think our tasks are really big, Philip.
Okay, thank you. Now I will introduce Alison Tickell. You are here. You are with us.
Hello, and thanks so much to everybody at Verbier and to my fellow panelists. And I am very glad to be here and to be here with you, because the climate and ecological crisis needs all of us to work quickly, to work collaboratively, and to keep focused and sure. There is no time to lose. The pandemic has shockingly accelerated the inevitable great reckoning with our deeply broken economic systems, which are in turn breaking our precious planetary systems, and getting to grips with this emergency, understanding how to implement radical change is, frankly, impossible to do, maintaining business as usual. So rethinking is now an imperative. Julie's Bicycle, which is a company I started 13 years ago, was formed initially by the music industry, but now works right across the performing, visual arts and museums. We work with hundreds and have worked with thousands of organizations and artists internationally to co-curate the ideas, the solutions, the tools, the resources that we need to unleash the power of the creativity and arts to feel our way into the world that we need. And we do have the largest free resource for anybody who wants to take action. Please do go to the website www.juliesbicycle.com for some ideas. So Julie's Bicycle is founded on two ideas. One is that the climate crisis is in fact a cultural crisis, and two, that we cannot wait for the existing system, the status quo, to sort this out for us, because it can't. It brought us here. We've got to change the system, and that means a step change in cultural activities, in policy investment, in training, in tools, and in commissioning and artistic ideas. We need a unifying and a mobilizing international approach that embeds sustainability and justice into the fabric of the arts. What might this look like? Well, we actually have all the key frameworks and ideas into which we need to pour the best of ourselves. We have the Paris Climate Agreement, we have Sustainable Development Goals, we have the circular economy, we have the Green Deal, and thank heavens, we have more and more commitment to restoring wildlife and nature. This is because we are profoundly and wonderfully part of nature. We are not separate to nature. And we really need to think about restoring nature and restoring ourselves. There are four big themes here. One is an immediate, rapid and urgent reduction in greenhouse gas emissions to net zero. Two, a world without waste that moves away from excessive, often undesired consumption of finite resources pillaged from the natural world towards a more circular idea of stuff. Three, we need to restore and protect our biodiversity and our wildlife. And four, we need to root everything we do, every thought we have, in the idea of justice. This last is perhaps the most important, because I have come to realize over the 13 years of being here that without justice, we are lost. This is justice both for ourselves as human beings, but also for the natural world that we share. The origins of the climate and the ecological crisis are in large part found in a prevailing attitude of human supremacy, often celebrated in culture and the arts over all other forms of life. This has fostered not only terrible harm in the natural world, but also an enduringly uneven global growth model, which has dispossessed millions of people of land and livelihoods and desperately degraded the natural world. So the story of climate change is not found in the ice caps. That's just a symptom. It lies in the buried histories of human conquest, anchored in cultural values that celebrate the idea of human supremacy. That is why the climate crisis fundamentally is a cultural crisis. After years of being very centrally in this space, I believe that the most serious lost opportunity is the desperately slow realization of our deepest interconnectivity with Mother Earth, and why we need to put art and culture at the forefront of our overarching response. But during the life of Julie's Bicycle, I've seen and witnessed an incredible new ecology of creative climate practice that has been emerging all over the world. And many of you listening might see yourselves as part of this exciting movement of change. There are 5 key areas of activity that are currently operating, and 2 new ways of working that cherish our planet. Collaboration is one of those. Work together, come together in this incredibly exciting movement of change, which is superseding competition. And the second is pathfinding, which is exploring, discovering these new networks, these new mycorrhizal ways of working that actually is creating different ways of understanding our journeys. We see this new ecology, which maps directly across to the bigger frameworks in, first of all, the artwork, curation, exhibitions. The climate crisis and the cherishing of Mother Earth is the muse of the day. It is forming huge creative inspiration and ideas. So there is no shortage of artists taking action, as many of you will already know. Secondly, people, campaigns, activists, people from the world of arts and culture who are getting up and speaking directly and didactically to their truths. We need to hear them and celebrate them and platform them. 3, organizations, leadership that's taking place in our institutions, organizations that are so often embody the values that we feel, that are really rethinking everything that they do, every decision that they make, and how they exist for their communities, collaborating together. 4, there are makers, social and material designers and innovators and architects who are really rethinking what they do and how they work in the world and what kinds of social and material practice that they're developing. And 5, there are influencers, the policymakers and the funders that are creating a framework and the investment in which we can create this new world. And here is the reality check. Yesterday, widespread news that 2020 was indeed the warmest year on record, regardless of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of around 7%. As a result of COVID. We will not experience that reduction for many years to come. So we still have a trajectory, a warming trajectory that is extremely serious. We're in the midst of this great reckoning, the eye of the storm, and there will be great turbulence, but everywhere renewal is bubbling up and gathering momentum. And in this movement, everything matters. All the small actions and connections speaking to cultural values that cherish and care. The visual arts has a magnificent history of activating social and more recently environmental transformation. But I have to say to you now, it is nowhere near enough. This year, in the run-up to the next climate talks, which are taking place in November, which are the most important climate talks that we've ever had, they're called COP, the Conference of the Party, COP26 talks, we all have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform this creative economy that is no longer fit for purpose into an ecology that is equitable, collaborative, resilient, and restorative. Thank you.
Okay, maybe I would like to say something, you know, because we are designer, we are architect, we are artist. I think, and the Verbier Art Summit is about this connection, about the art and thinker, and I would like to say something about, you know, kind of division of 2 levels or two layers. The first layer is the political layers about our art. It means, you know, as an artist or an architect, you are taking the airplane to go somewhere. You know, it was like that before the pandemic. You know, you was taking the airplane and then you doing an exhibition in another continent, you know, and you were using some expensive material and then it was destroyed after the end of the exhibition. So it was like the condition of our practice. And then this is maybe, of course, there are a lot of things to do against that, you know, to reduce all the CO2 emission during all the process of doing something. But then, you know, this is for all the citizens on the planet. They have to do the same, you know. So this is not something specific to the artist or to architect or designer. Then there is another layer, is maybe the matter of the art. So the first one is the politic of the art, and then maybe the second one is the matter of the art. And I was thinking about, you know, if I'm a choreographer, if I'm a dancer, what I have to do with my own art, you know, how the climate change and the pandemic will change my art. And so I was thinking, okay, first, you know, I have to stop to think, you know, because we know that when we think loudly, you know, we spread the virus, you know. It's why, you know, it's happened, you know, in France, the first moment it was in the church, because everybody was singing, you know, and it was creating a cloud of virus everywhere. And so it was the first cluster of in France, in the east of France. So first we have to stop to think, you know, or we have to think about how to think without spreading the virus. Or then if I'm a choreographer, maybe I have to do a low calorie dance, you know, because if I'm moving a lot, you know, I need to eat a lot. And so maybe I have to change, you know, to do a very slow movement, you know, so I will use less calorie, and so I will emit less CO2, you know. So this is the change inside our practice, you know. We don't have to talk only about, okay, I will stop to take the airplane, I will stop to, you know, we have also to change our own practice, you know. And this is, you know, about the distinction about form and you know, the content and the form, you know. This is quite important, these two layers of acting. So maybe all of you, if you want to have a statement about that, or what do you think about that?
Philip, I think I'd like to ask you a question about the statement that you just made to us, because I think I'm quite intrigued, because your description of a dancer is super helpful. It places us in a sphere that we think we know, but I'm curious about your reduction of speed and of breadth. Then I think I want to ask you the question of, who then do we dance for? Who are we dancing for? This must be in your series of questions, not only what do we change of our dance, but now who do we dance for? Because there is more changes than just the ones we are in. It's a radical re-questioning of who do we dance for.
Yeah, I think you know, I think this, you know, the climate, the global warming and the virus is also changing the form of, you know, it's no more the same form. It's not only, it will create some new form. And then last year at the Verbier Summit, with an actor, he was talking about, you know, because there is a lot of actors that are unemployed today, you know. So he was thinking, okay, because we can no more take the airplane, so maybe the actor can play the role of someone for a lecture, you know. So if, for example, Tim have to do a lecture in Rome tomorrow, so I will be, you know, I will talk like Tim, you know, because I'm already in Rome, so I can play the real world. So it means that as an actor, maybe you can be the actor not only of fiction, but also of reality, you know. So this is really an interesting way of changing our way of thinking, you know, by not talking only about the condition of our work, you know, about airplane and material and CO2 emission, about that, but also the change of our practice in terms of form.
I think there's something underneath that which I suppose it's perhaps it's implicit, but just pulling it out, which is and it's very interesting by your question, Claire, which is really, what do we have a responsibility to serve something different? Is there a service part of this old-fashioned, but actually I think really interesting and meaningful word that has been anathema in lots of arts practice for a long time? I mean, it's a question that I think we all have to ask whether we're artists or otherwise. But that sort of principle of do no harm, it's the next step. It's actually, can we replenish? Are we serving ourselves and our small communities? And it's a really big civic question at the moment. Or is there something that is greater than ourselves? And again, I think, Timothy, you brought that out beautifully when you were talking about this kind of uncovering of what it is to be a deeply interconnected part of our reality, to be formed by and to be responsive to, and fundamentally to be respectful and grateful for this different existential promise, recognition. And again, Claire, you were talking about the work that you do, how to weave that in. And of course, at the heart of all of this is a brilliant moment for a start, Philip, just to say, I think one of the things that I feel very strongly is that actually this is an embodied response. It's not an either or. We're so determined all the time to create binaries that you do one thing or you do the other. It is art or it is practice. It is the artist or it's the institution. And actually, I think now increasingly that there is a much more interesting dynamic flow that we all experience in our everyday. We have multiple selves, multiple bacteria, we're so full of bodies that are not actually ourselves. So all of this wonderful, which you've talked a bit about, Timothy, this incredible stretching of what it is to be sensate. But also, I think there's just no fixed state in all of this. And so when you talk about materials, I think it's a question for artists, as it is for every single being on this planet who can make decisions, to say, is this a regenerative or is it a depleting activity? And that's an incredibly exciting creative challenge. I mean, what a refreshing, amazing renaissance for the arts and culture to unlock creativity in service to this greater, wonderful, living, breathing idea. Sorry, I'm going to shut up now.
But Alison, I have to pick up on that, because it is there are many practices that are regenerating materials, and we can look at this as a conceptual form or we can look at it as a material form. And I do think that the separation of those is sometimes difficult. You kind of you talk about the polarization, but there are many ways that especially in material cultures where one material form that has been an artwork is then reinvented into another form of another artwork, and not necessarily with a bidding to the earlier, but a regenerated use of a thing in some form. And I think that for everybody who's listening to this debate, that doesn't just mean only the physical elements. It can certainly mean the conceptual elements and the wholeness of a thing. And I think that sense of being in a history past, present and future is a co-relationship that all artists can understand. And as you say, it's a celebration of understanding that to a deeper level, the deeper level, Tim, that you've discussed of the knowingness of this.
Yeah, maybe I'll add to it too. I think one of the fascinating lines of thought that's being developed here from Philippe Rahm is that that this process can be a joyful process. It can be a rewarding process. And I think one of the problems with the environmental movement that's beginning to shift a bit, but still is pretty endemic to the whole movement and to the way people see it and to ecological thinking, is that it requires sacrifice, that we have to give things up, right? We're going to give up our big trucks. We're going to, give up flying, like you were saying, Philippe. We have to deny things to ourselves. But I think one of the things I'm hearing here is, yes, perhaps, but there is a compensation. There is the joy that would come from that awareness, right? Even from something as simple as, how am I breathing? How much energy am I expending? And finding your connection to that world, to these beautiful creative possibilities that you are all talking about, I think there's a real, it's not a denial of life. It's a celebration of a better life, of a richer life, a deeper life, and a more joyful life. And that's the story I try to put out there for those folks who see, just doom and gloom for trying to respond to the crisis of global warming. Well, yeah, it's a challenge, to be sure. There are big challenges we have to face, but I always tell my students, whenever the weather's nice, I ride my bike. I ride my bicycle up to them. And, we're outside. We often meet outside because I prefer to be outside. So I ride my bike up and I say, riding this bicycle is not just about being ecologically sensitive or responsible, but it makes me happier. I'm a better person, right? And I'm a more creative and joyful person because I do this. So I think that's a message that I'm hearing too. It really is a joyful thing.
I think from the shared conversation we've had and from the words that we've all spoken, I think one of the things that I really want to pick up on is not only the work that I see Philip doing, but also the kind of celebration that Tim's made towards joyfulness, that there can be a path through this with art and activism from our points of reflection and doing, and some of the things that surround us in terms of trust and recognizing human exceptionalism and that relationship to nature. I think the conversation we've had has really encouraged me that there is not only much to do, but this can be a joyous experience.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and so goodbye.